Curtis Valentine here, founder of Real Men Teach, and you are listening to Ed Up, Accelerated Excellence.
This episode of Ed Up Accelerated Excellence is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, Nevada, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of Ed Up Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EDUPXE15 off. Check the show notes for more information or learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
Are you an educational leader or organization seeking innovation or just a new perspective? Then look no further. Accelerated Excellence Consulting is dedicated to offering support to educational leaders and their organizations to meet their full potential for excellence. Services include strategic planning and problem solving, continuous improvement expertise in areas such as assessment and accreditation, and professional development, empowering leaders, individuals, and groups for personal growth for organizational excellence. To learn more, find us online at xeconsulting.org. That's xeconsulting.org. Welcome to Ed Up Accelerated Excellence, the podcast for the advancement of educational excellence and equity. And our guest today is Jerrica Thurman, who is President and CEO of Elation Communications. Jerrica, welcome to the show. And would you mind please giving voice to your name by introducing yourself to the Ed Up Accelerated Excellence community and tell us just a snippet about what is the role and the work of Elation Communications?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jerrica Thurman, founder and CEO of Elation Communications, and it's an honor to be part of this conversation today. So thank you, Jacob, for the invitation. Especially with the topic today focused on the intersection of marketing, media, and education, which is really where my heart and work reside. So at Elation Communications, we help purpose-driven organizations, particularly in education and nonprofit sectors, amplify their impact through strategic storytelling, through branding, inclusive communications, and campaigns that move people to act. Our mission is rooted in elevating voices, building trust, and connecting meaningfully with audiences. And we do this by blending deep strategy with a creative spark and an equity lens. My background spans over 20 years in marketing, communications, and organizational strategy, and I've worked with associations, education institutions, advocacy groups, and coalitions, many of which were at turning points, whether they were rebranding, restructuring, or responding to a cultural moment. I was often brought in to guide the transformational phase. So that journey led me to create Elation Communications.
So, Jerrica, thank you for that. So many years of experience across different contexts, working with organizations. When did you know, though, that you were in a sense sitting in the pocket, in the cradle of the uplift or the use of your talents, and the decision to now focus those into the development of an organization or a firm for marketing and branding, Elation Communications?
So the seed was planted years ago when I kept seeing a recurring problem. Organizations with important missions but unclear messaging. They struggle to connect with their stakeholders, with their funders or their communities as they sought to make impact. So not because of the work wasn't there, but because the story wasn't being told effectively or inclusively. Elation Communication was born from the belief that communication is not just tactical, it's transformational. I wanted to create a firm that helps organizations find their voice, that clarifies their purpose, and express their values in a way that feels real, resonant, and respectful of the communities they serve. So our edge lies in our intersectional approach. We combine strategic planning with inclusive design thinking, content development, and visual storytelling, all while anchoring everything in authenticity and impact.
So, Jerrica, I want to quote a study. And there's a study that reports that 41% of consumers globally switched brands due to the lack of inclusivity or diversity in marketing. Can you unpack these results, and why are inclusivity and diversity important in marketing based on the work that you've done with your clients?
Yes, that stat comes from a global study that revealed just how much consumers are holding brands accountable. What's happening is a shift in values. People aren't just buying products or services anymore. They're buying into what a brand represents. And if they don't feel represented or included, they disengage. We've seen this in our work time again. Inclusive marketing builds trust, and trust builds loyalty. Whether it's how a nonprofit talks about community impact or how a university engages prospective students, representation matters. The language we use, the visuals we choose, the voice we elevate, they all signal something deeper. You belong here. And this isn't about being politically correct. It's about being culturally aware, empathetic, and human-centered. Inclusivity in marketing isn't optional. It's essential.
So I like that idea of belonging. It means that we want to connect with you, and whether you use our products, services, or forums, that this is a place that will respect you as an individual, whether you're spending money or just engaging, right?
Right, exactly.
So Elation Communications has developed a framework which is called Inclusive Communications. For those who are new to this concept, what are the key elements?
Yeah, so our inclusive communication framework is a strategic guide for embedding equity and accessibility into all communication efforts. It's built around 4 key pillars: representation. We examine who is visible in your content and whether it reflects the diversity of the people you serve. Language equity. We help clients use inclusive, accessible, and culturally conscious language that empowers rather than alienates. Audience insight. We research the layered identities, values, and needs of your audiences, so you're not just talking at them, but with them. And then lastly, systems alignment. We ensure your external communications align with your internal values and practices, because inconsistency undermines trust. So inclusive communication isn't just a strategy, it's a responsibility, right? At its core, the inclusive communications framework is about making sure your messages are accessible, respectful, and relevant to everyone, especially those who have been historically underrepresented. And that means understanding your audience deeply, who they are, what they need, and how they prefer to engage. It's about using language that affirms, not excludes. Ensuring your content meets accessibility standards means focusing on and featuring diverse voices and visuals, not as an afterthought, but as a standard. Being culturally sensitive, inviting feedback, and continuously learning from it. So most importantly, inclusive communication is not a checkbox. It's an ongoing commitment to equity and social justice. When we embed this framework into our daily practices, whether it's from leadership messaging to digital content, it builds trust, drives engagement, and ultimately creates spaces where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. So We've used this framework with clients undergoing DEI brands, strategic plans, and campaign launches. It's been a game changer in helping organizations communicate both with clarity and conscience.
So I like this idea. You talk about systems change or systems alignment.
Correct.
And I think in some ways that would be the pinnacle outcome in terms of operation, in some ways for sustained quality in inclusive communications, while language equity in some other areas would be foundational to get you to a solid system.
Exactly. You can't have one without the other.
Right. So when you work with folks, and I often like to have my guests think about the challenges that occur, what would you say from what you've seen so far is their pattern around the most difficult aspect of switching from what might be traditional approach to communication to inclusive communication? Where do folks struggle the most?
Well, I think where the struggle is the most is moving away from performative design. So essentially, again, not making it a checkbox, but more focused on transformational experiences, which means there has to be more authenticity ingrained in the work. And so that requires going the extra mile and having a deeper understanding of your key audience and really what does resonate with them. So you're focused more on reaching their needs and less on your needs.
So, it's interesting when folks think about a target audience. But if you are looking at, let's say, a multinational or you have a product or services that addresses communities across contexts, that requires a bit of universal design when you think about inclusive communication. So what parallels, for example, in education, we talk about universal design where we allow curriculum to be or develop curriculum so that it is accessible by all community members or all learners. Is there any interplay between universal design and the framework for inclusive communication?
Yes, there is a clear connection. Focus on the ultimate goal, right? That with universal design, there's ultimately with the multi-layered audience or objectives, there's an ultimate goal. But just with the concept of cultural competency in teaching, there still must be a varied approach that connects to each audience and reaches and applies to their differences in order to achieve that goal, right? And so essentially, there's never a one-size-fits-all concept in inclusive communication. You must, again, be willing to diversify your approach to achieve that ultimate goal that may be set for that universal design.
Perfect. So I want to go back to you a bit. So when did you first realize your passion for marketing, public relations, and communications? And I ask this because this is a series on marketing and media, but I also want to know, young Jerrica, what sparked this and how was your passion nurtured over the years?
It started young. I was always fascinated by how stories could shape perceptions. As a student, I was drawn into media and public speaking, but my pivotal moment was being selected by Emma Boeing Foundation to intern at NBC 10 WCAU in Philadelphia. I was their first minority intern through that program, and it changed my life. I saw firsthand the power and responsibility of media. And since then, I've built my career around helping others find their voice and use it strategically. Over time, my passion has evolved from simply telling stories to transforming systems through communications. And that's whether teaching college courses or launching campaigns. I remain fueled by that original spark.
Yeah, and could you point to an experience where you saw that you knew you were doing the right thing? I mean, when did you know, and who are your champions during this period?
Yeah, I say I want to say that Joanne Wilder, she was certainly a critical mentor for me during that time. She took me under her wing and really helped me learn the ropes of media broadcasting. And one of the key things as a very young a teenager, I understood how people of diverse backgrounds are represented in media, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. And I became committed during that time to make sure it's more good than not.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, and it's really interesting to see that this really has been a lifelong passion of yours, starting at an early age, to uplift communities through communication. So AI has taken off, within the profession. So I entered into, well, actually, with the help of AI, I entered a query regarding the importance of effective communication. So I wanted to just see how this would work out in AI, getting ready for my show. The response returned was this: effective communication is the foundation for strong relationships, conflict resolution, and informed decision making, all of which are essential for a well functioning society. So, thinking about the role of AI, particularly generative AI, what roles do you see AI playing in social human condition building, both good and bad, in this area of communication and marketing?
AI is here and it's changing the game. On the positive side, AI helps us work smarter, streamlining content creation, improving accessibility, and even generating audience insights. At Elation, we use AI to enhance strategy, not replace it. But there is a cautionary side, right? If used without intentionality, AI can strip away the humanity in communication. It can reinforce bias or produce generic content that lacks soul. Relationships are built on empathy, emotion, and trust, qualities AI can't fully replicate. So the key is balance. Use AI as a support tool, but keep the heart, the nuance, and the lived experience front and center.
I think that though that's an important sort of goalposts, and I want to push you if you don't mind on the issue, because I think a lot of folks are concerned about how do we know when things are generated by AI if they're real and if they aren't real, and are they trustworthy? So if someone is trying to build a brand and the inclusive of AI, how do we think about this notion of trustworthiness or skepticism that folks might have?
Yeah, I think at the root of inclusive communication is storytelling, right? And so those are things that AI cannot truly replace a human in doing. And so again, AI should be used as a support tool. We're talking about in storytelling, authenticity, truth telling, so these are the things that we could use AI as to assist us with, but we must always be, the mind and the brain behind content that's generated by AI.
So I want to think about back in education broadly. So we've asked another guest a similar question, because there seems to be, in some ways, a disinvestment in public education. So from kindergarten to college, I think over the years, education has taken some hit around those who are questioning the quality of public education or even the value of a college degree. So from a marketing and public relations perspective, what are your thoughts on how educators might press or address issues that speak to a devaluation or lack of importance in education. So how might educators respond to those claims that education is of poor quality or has lost historical, what we may perceive of as historical quality, or even the value of attending college now today?
This is such a timely and urgent question. Educators today, they are navigating not only the pressures of the classroom, but also a media environment that too often devalues their expertise, their commitment, and their impact, as you've mentioned. From a marketing and PR perspective, it is clear we can no longer afford to play defense. We must focus on a bold, proactive strategy to reclaim the narrative and reaffirm the value of teaching profession. So first, I recommend we focus on reframing, right? So educators are not just content deliverers. They are nation builders, they're innovators, and they're first responders to the social and emotional needs of our youth. Communications should consistently reflect the truth, and that means highlighting the victories, the big and small wins, spotlighting the schools that are turning around literacy rates, teachers who are integrating AI into lesson plans, or classrooms where students are solving real-world problems. Then secondly, I would recommend focusing on diversifying the messengers, right? So the most compelling narratives often come from the students, the parents, and fellow educators, not just district spokespeople. Imagine a campaign where former students reflect on the impact of a single teacher, right? So, or a series of short videos where educators share why they stayed, not just why others left. These authentic stories should build public empathy and reinforce credibility. Thirdly, I recommend a unified message. One of the weaknesses in the education sector's response to negative press is fragmentation. Different unions, schools, and advocacy groups often speak in silos. But just like other professions have branded themselves, think a nurse or support small businesses. Education needs a value-driven campaign that transcends institutions. Messaging should center around shared values, focused on dignity, equity, opportunity, and the future of our democracy. And then lastly, I recommend embracing modern communication tools, right? So using data storytelling, social media influencers in education, and partnerships with journalists, that all helps to elevate the stories that truly reflect the complexity and the courage of the teaching profession. Educators should also be media trained, right? I believe in that. I've actually had the experience of training some educators, and they should be empowered to speak up, not shrink back. When the narrative is inaccurate or reductive, educators should be ready with facts, with their heart, and with a clear call to action. Because at the end of the day, the question isn't just about press coverage, it's about public perception. And public perception shapes policy, it shapes funding, and whether the next generation sees teaching as a calling worth answering.
Yeah, I like that. I can definitely see that this really does lean back into human relationships. How you tell the story, to whom you tell the story. If the story is believable, how it connects and resonates with audiences. But the bigger picture that I think that as you end it with is that the communication can influence, or effective communication, and perhaps even ineffective communication can influence policy, or how policy is shaped, or what we think about issues in order going into the ballot box, or those who are writing policy, but then also funding for schools and educational organizations. So thank you for that. I think that's something that, we can all lean in on, is how we think about communications across the system. So I like the idea of systems again.
Thank you for listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence. This episode is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EdUPXE15OFF. Check out the details in the show notes or learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
Are you an educational leader or organization seeking innovation or just a new perspective? Then look no further. Accelerated Excellence Consulting is dedicated to offering support to educational leaders and their organizations to meet their full potential for excellence. Services include strategic planning and problem solving, continuous improvement expertise in areas such as assessment and accreditation, and professional development, empowering leaders, individuals, and groups for personal growth for organizational excellence. To learn more, find us online at xeconsulting.org. That's xeconsulting.org. So, thinking about human relationships and a functioning society. So going back to the AI definition of what effective communications is. Elation Communications recently launched services on DEI rebranding. And I know this because you and I have partnered on some of this work. So can you share the backstory on this initiative and the services that are provided by Elation Communications in the area of DEI rebranding?
Yes, so first I want to thank you, Dr. Easley, for partnering with Elations on this important initiative. We launched our DEI rebranding service in a direct response to today's shifting regulatory and political climate. With federal scrutiny increasing, especially following executive orders by the current administration, right? Organizations are at a crossroads. So they want to stay true to their values around diversity and inclusion. But they also need to protect themselves from financial, operational, and reputational risks. So again, focusing on that system design. That's where Elation developed our DEI rebranding 7-point strategy. We help organizations strategically reposition themselves and their workplace inclusion efforts, not by watering them down, but by aligning them more closely with their core business goals and compliance standards. It's about reframing the narrative, moving away from politically charged language and toward a focus on workplace culture, talent development, and employee engagement. Our strategy includes everything from compliance audits and message reconfiguration to stakeholder engagement, leadership training, and risk mitigation. The goal is to build a sustainable, inclusive workplace that's protected against backlash while still driving innovation, retention, and profitability. So at Elation Communications, we believe companies shouldn't have to choose between staying mission-driven and staying compliant. Our DEI rebranding service offers a proactive, values-aligned path forward, one that endures stability, protects brand equity, and positions organizations for long-term success in our current complex environment.
Complex environment for sure. That we're definitely in a complex environment. So I want to sort of challenge here, because as you were talking, it made me think about culture, and culture is always shifting. So when we talk about and conflicts, so what you said, you mentioned politically charged language. While language may not be politically charged wholesale today, as culture shifts, it becomes politically charged tomorrow in certain contexts. So for example, equity. It's baffling to think that, and maybe it's not equity by itself, maybe it's not diversity, maybe it's not inclusion, but the words together have been politically charged. You're correct about that. Perhaps not individually, but as that shift, how do organizations then continue to rebrand themselves, or is it just a language game whenever the political shifts? So if the values are the same, do we just change language, or is it a matter of how do we think about human relations in society, and how do we change perhaps societal thought and societal norms through our communications and language? And I know that's a big question.
Yes, it is a big question, but I think it's a simple answer. I mean, historically in this country, human culture and language has always evolved, right? So this is nothing new in the sense of where we are today. It's just, how do we stay, ahead of the trend, and yet let it be rooted in substance, right? And so understanding that intersection of human needs and how to best express the culture through language is where the real work lies. Essentially, when you look at even the word gender, I mean, that has evolved over the years. And so this is not a new nuance, right? It's just, it's essentially embracing the change from a positive perspective as opposed to a negative connotation. When we approach the process of evolving language through a positive lens, then we arrive to the conclusion that benefits everyone.
Yes, I think when we talk about human relations, in some ways, what you're advocating for in communication ultimately, or as a mediator, is, are we centering human dignity?
Absolutely.
And I think how people, based on their context and their experiences, might interpret dignity a bit differently from their vantage points. And how do we mediate those differences, knowing that as society changes, political norms changes, economic resources, there's an ebb and flow through communities, that those perspectives around human dignity are likely to change and shift.
That's right. And I think, too, it's understanding the balance of language being reflective, but also being regenerative, right? So essentially, language actually leads the way while it also reflects the current way of life, right? And so that is the power of language. And so thinking of language more forward thinking helps people to embrace this dynamic in organizations better. And this is part of the work of inclusive communications that we do at Elation Communications.
Right. Like I said, so yours is looking at ultimately sort of systems alignment as one of the goals. And then, of course, meeting the goals of your constituent group. So if it's an association or a school or a corporate conglomerate, what their goals are for effective or inclusive communication. But at the same time, at a small level, how does it help us to remain intentional about how we speak about
things? And that's connected to the values, right? There's always the values. And so, and that's where you're right. You have to take small steps. And so it really is, for it to be, I would say, authentic, right, is first asking, before we begin focusing on language, who are we? Who do we say we are? Are we actually living up to that? And then, by working on those kinds of deep-rooted, foundational issues, then the language helps to bring it to life.
Oh, wonderful. So What's next for Elation Communications, and how might the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community engage?
We are excited about what's ahead. We're expanding our consulting services, and we're focusing on developing more educational tools. So we've launched a series of toolkits, and we're partnering more with education-focused organizations on inclusive branding and strategic campaigns. And for the EdUp community, we're open for collaboration, whether it's a brand refresh or a DI messaging strategy, or just a regular campaign development. You can visit us at elationcommunications.com or follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, or reach out directly to learn more about our services. We'd love to support your mission with thoughtful, creative, and values-driven communications. And together, we can elevate not just brands, but the voices and the values that shape our future.
Jerrica, Thurman, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to learn with and from you here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Thank you for engaging with EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a member of the EdUp Experience Network of educational podcasts. You can find this and other episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Radio, and other outlets where you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow us and share within your network. To leave a comment or suggest a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com.